So today, I think one of the aspects that we are addressing is a very crucial one, and that's the aspect of making online engagement or online learning more engaging. Uh, Certainly, in the last 2 months, the world has seen a complete impact and a rollover in terms of how the physical classroom, the brick and mortar, has been replaced with this virtual platform. And whether we like it or not, everyone, from parents to learners and students to faculty, teachers, managements, they have all begun to accept this change and this transition as the new normal. Whether it will stay forever is difficult to say. It's a question the whole world is looking to an answer for. But what will certainly happen is that in the years to come, even if we were and whenever we were to return to our normal schools, there will be a component of what we do experience in these last few weeks, which we will now carry forward. We will carry with us some of the learnings that come, and we will carry with us some of the tools for which we have upskilled ourselves. The biggest challenge, I think, if we look at is that we have so far pretty much tried to bring online learning to replace the physical chalk and talk learning that we have been doing in our respective spaces of learning, whether it is a school, whether it is a center of higher learning, or whether it's a place of private coaching or engagement. But we have preferred initially to accept and adopt to an approach where we feel comfort in pretty much a synchronous learning environment, as it is called. As I'm speaking with all of you, I am also in many ways practicing the same approach. Talk, you listen. If you have inputs to give, you question back. If not, the knowledge, and therefore it is established to be done. How effective is that and how effective it has been in the past is difficult to say. We have always known in our own lives, personally as students, as well as in the field of education, that not everyone is able to keep the same pace. In a physical classroom of 35, 40, 45, or even more number of students, we see, and when we physically see, we are able to capture a lot of the learning environment, and based on that environment, we are able to address and take a call on how to pace it. Right now, our situation is more like the person who's inside his house and is only able to see the outside world through the keyhole of his door. When you look at your students today, you see them through the eye of the camera, and that too, if you are able to get a good view of them, which sometimes could be a technological or a mindset challenge. In that situation, when you do not have sight, when you do not have physical control of the learning environment, when you cannot watch their body language as to how they are responding to your learning, it is very difficult for an adult teacher to judge and gauge effectively if learning is happening in the manner which should provide him or her the satisfaction that they seek. In such times, therefore, what is it that you do? The human mind instinctively wants to teach more because you feel that there is less resistance, there is less distraction. Now everyone's listening, they can't go anywhere. There are parents who are watching them sit in front of their machines and their laptops. Let me teach more because this way I will be able to transact better. Research proves time and again that this is a time when you teach less and you learn more. This is the time when you engage and obtain feedback. This is the time when you collaborate. This is the time when you allow for peer engagement and assessment to happen. This is the time when you're kind to yourself. What would I mean by each of these three terms? Let's spend a few minutes talking about it. And if at any stage some of you do have questions, please raise your hand, or you can indicate that by typing the text, and we will set aside time at the end to respond to those questions to the extent possible. Why teach less and learn more? I think it's important at these times to understand that the learning environment has changed drastically, not just for you, not just for the learner, but for the entire ecosystem. Our resources, our curriculum, our textbooks, our assignments, our assessments have not been crafted or designed to facilitate online learning in an engaging way. They are being now converted to adapt to being transacted online. The textbook which we have used has always been a source of information. It's the teacher and his conversation or her engagement which has converted that information to knowledge and has further enhanced it to understanding. But we do not have a direct means of establishing whether this understanding is effectively working or not. Keeping this in mind, it is important that we break it down. We try and process for ourselves in that environment that if we had to learn, keeping the age appropriate level of our learner, how would we go about it? What would I do as an individual, as an adult, to make sure that students learn more, not that I teach more? Very often, we are driven by either the mandate from the curriculum agencies or bodies, or from our higher ups in the school administration system, or through parental pressure or various other factors, that we are provoked to complete the syllabus, to finish that transaction, which means we are driven to teach more. Does that mean that the students learn more? There is a tool which we would need to use to evaluate from our perspective whether that learning is happening, and if it's happening, is it being validated and effectively recorded? Because there is a huge lack of control, so to speak, that exists now in this platform, where you cannot physically administer all varieties of assessments in an authentic way. Academic honesty is questionable, access to resources is questionable, the learning time and learning cycle are also of a different nature. The third point here is be kind to yourself. Give it time. Why do I emphasize on this? I think there is a sudden rush and an urge to transact, to demonstrate that we are on top of the situation. Yes, we are. We certainly are. We have not let learning go away. But we also need to discount the fact that there is a lot of education, there is a lot of learning that each one of us is accepting. This generation of school and college going children are the first of the human species who are experiencing real life learning by being at home and understanding what a pandemic is. No one else has ever had prior learning, experience, or exposure to it. Do not discount that fact. Do not underestimate that for them at this age, this is a lot to take in physically, socially, emotionally. They are confined to spaces. They do not get to meet their friends. They do not have access to the grounds, play fields, and other facilities that they would have enjoyed at any given point in time. And they are coping with it. They're coping perhaps sometimes better than the adults are coping with it. Of course, they do not have to earn a livelihood. They do not have to necessarily go to a job, but they have the task of learning and they are doing that handsomely. Let's always keep that in mind, and in the process, bear in mind that we who constitute the learning tools and the facilitators are also bridging this gap. We are not only working from home, but we are also working at home. Our lives have also changed. Our time schedules have also changed. Our accessibility has also changed. Our engagement with our families, with our own children, with people who are around us, as well as the job expectations that we have, are also changing and evolving at the same time. And we need to factorize that. We need to factorize the fact that when such changes happen, they require a complete transformation in our processes as well. Let's look at why learning ought to be engaging. It should be engaging because children learn differently. Diversity is the key of any classroom environment. When we look at children, they are not of the same size, shape, learning competencies. The best example of this is in the 8 key learning styles, which were identified by Howard Gardner. Each child could have one or more than one of these learning styles to them. And we, as adults, as trained educators, need to give credence to that and align ourselves to the teaching learning methodologies which will give credence and respect to these skills. Children learn differently, they learn at different paces, and they learn through different motivational engagements. If we try and bring teachers in who will try to prescribe to a one-size-fits-all approach, we may find ourselves falling short of our code and our expectations to give them the best of what they deserve. We have usually been mindful of practicing these things in a physical and a spatial learning environment in our own schools and colleges. At a time when we do this from a virtual platform, let us not be unmindful of it. Let us be mindful of it and let us capture this as a huge element that is required at any stage for the learners to be familiar with. Here is a very simple and easy sounding technique which we can use to make our learning in the classrooms on a virtual platform effective. It's called kiss and tell. It's not my evolution, it's not my invention, but it's a technique which has been used across the world, especially in the African countries, where access of equity in terms of education has been hugely divergent. Not that it's any different in India, but we have taken it to ourselves to invest in private schools and let our children go there rather than worrying to make sure that government schools all through the country raise their bar consistently. Some of it could be constitutional because in India, school education is not a central subject nor a state subject, it's concurrent. But what does kiss and tell require? Kiss, very simple. Keep it simple and short. The more we try and address jargon, the more we try and bring in complicated materials and learning expectations, the more difficult it will be for the learner to accept all of that. Now, does that mean I underteach? Does that mean I dilute the syllabus? Does that mean I reduce the content? Does that mean I do not deliver what the assessing body or the exam body will have as expectations? No, not at all. I think what needs to be done is it needs to be broken down into smaller bits and pieces, because our absorption capacity is different in a physical learning space and different on a virtual learning space. It needs to be more digestible. It needs to be more quickly captured and at the same time reinforced. If we are able to do it this way, we will be in a position where the learning is more engaging. What do we do to make it more engaging? We teach. Sure, we do. We engage. We listen and we learn. Now, what are the tools of engagement you could use? You could collaborate and give projects which, in their own way, the teams can work with on a virtual platform. You could give presentations to make which are acceptable even with parental help and intervention. It is not a bad thing to use the stakeholders of parents in this process as your partners in the journey. Let's not forget, parents are as responsible for this learning cycle as you are and as the child is or as the student is. Their responsibility does not end by providing them with a laptop or a computer and a good internet connection. That is where their responsibility begins. A lot of parents often are found falling short of the expectations that one has to have of them, because the children are no longer in our daily custody. They are with them. They are in their daily custody, in their physical environment. And that is where I think one of the other bigger challenges comes to play. In our country, we do not have a very robust mechanism to protect how online learning happens. While online engagement is something that we look at, I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking a little bit about online safety. India relatively does in terms of the online safety index. Mind you, this data which is on your screens right now is largely taken from the private school sector in India. It does not extend the wider reach of children and young adults who are prone and vulnerable to all sorts of exposure to internet and especially the dark world out there. Let's look at the synchronous and asynchronous learning techniques which the world is today more readily and excitedly talking about. I've just placed a very simple overview or a definition of what synchronous and asynchronous means. None of them are meant to outbeat each other. Neither of them can substitute the other, nor can complement and be the whole soul of the new normal that we have. Probably blended learning is going to be the solution that the world will align to. There are different age groups, different requirements, and different ways of learning which will need to be factored in when we look at these tools and these techniques. It is important when we look at them to process this understanding that while certain aspects of learning can be done in a synchronous manner, there are certain which can be left to an asynchronous and an environment where you can self-pace your learning. Let's take a couple of instances here. Learning dance can be done both synchronous and asynchronous in both techniques. You can be taught certain steps in a phased and graded manner, while at the same time, recorded videos of it posted and shared with you can allow you to look at those steps again and again and improve on your own movement and attain perfection while you are at it. Because there's nothing better than practicing it, and practice maketh a man perfect. While there would be certain areas where synchronous is the only way forward. In this new normal world, there is a lot of focus that is being given on the quotients that are engaged with in our learning environment. For a long period of time, our education system has focused on the IQ. the intelligence quotient. We are now strongly looking at the digital quotient. I showed you a slide which shows India's digital quotient and our online safety index as well. But there is, in the middle, something called a socio-emotional quotient. Either you call it an EQ or an SQ, or in some places it's referred to as the SEQ. This socio-emotional quotient deals with the learner, his or her state of mind, and their ability to accept and abide by the new normal. That is something you cannot turn to an asynchronous environment. This is where the voice of the teacher, the physical contact of his or her parents, and the virtual visible engagement of counselors and well-being coordinators will have a very, very important role to play in times to come. Many, many millions of children today are out of school. Being out of school has not placed them out of a learning environment, but they are unable to come to terms very, very naturally and normally with what this new learning environment entails. And that is where we need to make that plan more engaging, more simultaneous, and more constructive. What if I were to start my lesson every morning on a virtual platform by asking them some leading questions? How was your evening last night? What did you eat? Did you all sit down and play something as a board game in your family? What else do you do when you are not on any of the OTT platforms like Netflix and Amazon, etc.? The more we will talk to them, the more we will find them in alignment with how we want to teach them in this new environment. Also, we will be able to then discover their different learning traits and design and customize our experiences for them based on what they would prefer to learn from. There are children who learn by doing things. Yet there are some who are very happy if they are provided with the notes and the text, and they will be able to acquire that knowledge on their own. This does not mean the previous instance of the learner is a difficult one. This does not mean that the second instance of a self-directed learner is a better one. They are both in the same situation that they are wanting to learn. And that's an asset that you have. Today, you have children who are willing to learn. Do we have the same kind of excited teachers who are willing to teach? And if we do, then what is it that we do to make that process for the learning community much more happier, much more joyful, and much more engaging? Now, this kind of captures the learning community as a holistic pattern. There is content that we need to deliver. There has to be student engagement where you believe and you transact in collaboration, yet at the same time in an asynchronous way. You allow some self-paced and independent study to happen. You use tools which allow dialectic questioning to happen. You could be using Padlets, you could be using Kahoot, you could be using some other tools which exist. And there is obviously, to validate that this learning is happening, a need to evaluate and assess. There are a host of platforms today which are more readily accessible and available to conduct on-screen assessments, whether it is ExamNet, whether it is Microsoft Forms, Google Docs, a lot of such tools and personalized or individualized softwares now available in the market. If not on a buy-in basis, on a trial basis, one can start exploring them. This social emotional, which needs to be hugely supplemented because face-to-face teaching or tutoring and advisement is not happening until children will be taught with skills to emote what their feelings are. One will not be in a position to give them a holistic and a wholesome experience in this bargain. What is a good screen time that should be given? If we go by WHO standards, which the World Health Organization has itself revised recently, then for children up to the age of 12, 1 hour of screen time a day is what is considered good. Anything more than that, and you are looking at screen addiction. In today's day and age, 1 hour goes away in just checking the social media. So when does one learn? Definitely, that is a challenge one is dealing with. And in that, one is dealing with the challenge of quality versus quantity. All of us use some or the other medium of social messaging, whether it is WhatsApp, whether it is Telegram, whether it is OTIM, or any other WeChat, etc., that one would be using. We know that about 80% of the content that comes in it in the form of forwards, etc., is not the quality that you are looking for. You have to painstakingly spend time to go through a lot of it, even if you skim them, to actually sieve out the content which is of quantity, which is of value to you. And to be able to do that, you would like to bring something which works for everyone here. Filter the content that we choose as adults from our social platforms. Similarly, children also need to be able to filter out the quality versus the quantity that comes their way. Since they do not have those rights, obviously, it is left to teachers and parents to do that. In a school learning environment, which is now run out of a virtual platform, it becomes our responsibility as teachers or as facilitators to watch what the context is, what is the content, what kind of connections would this develop. So what are the guidelines that you ought to keep as an educator to make your online lessons more fruitful, more enjoyable, and more effective? First, focus on feedback. Anything that you try and instruct about, whether it is synchronous or asynchronous, definitely try and obtain as much feedback that you are able to give back to the learners, and in as quicker a time as possible. Because feedback which is delayed does not have any impact on one's learning ability, because by that point of time, the learning has already sunk in. So timely feedback is crucial. It's even more crucial in an online learning environment, because unfortunately, the child does not have the ability to counter question you frequently on an ongoing basis, as would have been the case in a physical classroom. Try and put yourself in the shoes of a child who's 12, 15, or whatever is the age group that you teach, and imagine the kind of questions that they would think of. Develop an FAQ based on that. Having that frequently answered questions, run it past a colleague, run it past at least one of the students whom you teach, who you know has a reasonably good competency to understand. Possibly, if not a student, run it past nephew, niece, someone who is in that age appropriate bracket. Get them to think and validate for you what is it that a teacher ought to put down as instructions. What is it that one would require to know if one had to do a particular task or undertake a specific assignment or put together a project or to make a presentation? Have you factored in all the pros and cons and the guidelines? Because it's very difficult to operate from an adult's perspective and expect a child to be able to transact all of that. Be active in monitoring your emails or whatever other means of communication that your school may have established or you may have established with your students, so that you are in quick time able to respond to the burning questions that they may have for you. If you don't know the answer, it's perfectly all right. Respond by saying, I leave this to your best judgment, since even I am not certain how to go forward with it. None of us were born to be experts on making online teaching happen. We are all evolving and getting better at it. And which takes me back to what I showed in the first slide. Be kind to yourself. It's all right to not be able to answer everything. It's all right to falter. It's all right to not being able to transact at the pace which you would have, say it was a normal classroom. This is the new normal. The world is slowing down. It's all right for us to slow down. We are not in a rat race. No matter how long it takes, it is better to go slow with what you do and to do it well rather than not do it in the most appropriate way and damage the entire learning experience. Unless until you don't need to have real-time chats, don't distract yourself when you are engaging in an online activity, because at that point of time, keep your focus completely on engaging with the students. What is it that you ought to be mindful about? Offline work. Try and set work in such a way where there is either no need for the child to print or there is very limited printing that needs to get done. Please keep in mind that just like you, they are also confined to their homes. They may not have access to devices. They may have challenges with computer cartridges or printing cartridges and other such resources. And therefore, it would be best to keep our tasks which are engaged in a platform where this is not a mandate. When you are looking at offline activities, keep activities which are of a type, thereby allowing everyone to engage in a discussion at the back end, behind you, but keeping your aspirations in mind. Give them a pre-read material if you have to, or get them to have a chat or a conversation with a family member or a friend. There are very few in the Indian context, for example, who would have seen a lockdown kind of a situation ever in their living lives. The last time India faced this kind of a situation where blackouts were regularly conducted and people had to go into hiding was in 1971 when India went to a war with Pakistan and Bangladesh was created. Very few people from those years would be in a position to offer advice, and not all of that may be relevant today. But yes, what is relevant is the resilience that they gained. What is relevant is the lessons that they acquired back then of limiting their rations, of controlling their lives, of taking responsibility, of being responsible for themselves. These are huge lessons that your children can learn from, and you can map them to any subject, any curriculum that you may be subscribing to. Get them to connect with any such elders in their family or in their extended family. Let them share those resources on a virtual platform with all of you. For those who do not have access to such experiences, let that be known, let that be shared. Work time. A big challenge with work time has been that it's almost become 24/7 because people feel you couldn't be out anywhere since you're confined to your house. All I need to do is ping you on your phone or on your laptop or your device, and you ought to be accessible. Try and minimize that and regulate your working hours. The more you are able to structure and discipline that, the better would be the learning outcomes of it for you as well as for your students. Because it's important for them to understand that it's the school building that has gone away. When you engage in assignments, but you don't necessarily stretch it to a 24/7 platform. And that helps them and helps you to teach and effectively learn in the bargain. Give them alternative opportunities to read, research, do online discussions, and certainly focus on peer feedback. The older the children, the better they are at taking criticism in a constructive way from their peer group. and not as much from us adults. So the more we are able to bring in peer feedback into our mechanisms, the better would be the learning engagement, the better would be the engagement of them and their peers in wanting to do this at an increasing level, only improving the learning cycle that you are going for. Deadlines. Your physical deadlines, which you were able to set for them in an ongoing school environment, may not necessarily apply with the same frenetic and the frenzy that you would have expected otherwise. Give them ample time to complete assignments. Give them more time than you would probably provide, because it is necessary for students to be able to do this in a more constructive way. It is a new tool for them. It is a new experience for them. And as we discussed previously, keep the instructions as simple as you can. Put those instructions keeping the age group of the child in mind, and design them to suit the requirements of these children. Bandwidth. Now, India is a very divergent and a very vast country. Ms. Priya, may I request you to mute your mic, please? Ms. Priya? Yeah, thank you. Considering the diversity of the country and the access to internet, not everyone is on the same plane. Remarkably, despite all of that, one has to accept that the stability of Wi-Fi networks and internet bandwidth has been hugely beneficial in making online teaching, learning, and office work, and so on and so forth happen almost in a seamless manner. The near future will certainly have more challenges coming as the heat, as the summer picks up, and as we head towards monsoon. Disruption of stable internet can be a challenge or will be a challenge. We are mindful of those challenges, and we prepare our resources in such a manner that we keep them light, we keep them portable, we keep them in a manner where each one is able to make the best use of their limited availability of Wi-Fi. We will do much better than in a normal situation. So instead of uploading high definition videos, if we can reduce the kind of pixelation that is done, or if we share links and allow individuals to be able to download them in real time when they require it, we would be saving a lot of bandwidth that would otherwise not necessarily be most productively used. Even in terms of sharing files and documents, try to post only PDF files. The word PDF means it's a portable document format. It makes files much more easier to transmit as compared to open files, which can be heavier in size and may take longer to be transmitted. Try and use Google Docs or Office 365. Both of them give you platforms of spaces where you can save those documents, and as and when required, people can take it from there, work on them online in a collaborative way, and only convert or download them if need be. Google Docs gives you the Google Drive, Office 365 gives you OneDrive, and there's ample space of storage that you get with it as a part of the package. Try and save data there. It also frees you up from being dependent on one particular device or a machine. You can log in from any gadget, any device, including your phone. So long as you're able to sign in, you would be able to have access to all those resources. To the extent possible, do not ask for submissions via email, because if you use some platforms, here I have referred to a couple of them, My School One or Seesaw, you will be able to save a lot of clerical transaction for yourself, not anyone else, but mostly for yourself. Your time is precious. Your ability to engage with the learners should more be on transacting the curriculum and not chasing the completion of assignments and submissions. That should be something that children should take as their responsibility and take things forward. That's where I would like to stop.